The curse of the blockbuster movie adaptation has plagued this industry for more than 3 decades. But even a history of futility will not prepare you for the digital misery that is Thor, God of Thunder. Every aspect of the slapdash action game is forged in the flames of failure.
None of you will leave Asgard alive.
Amateurs' voice acting and woefully outdated visuals serve as flashing red warning lights urging you to avoid this abomination. But it's the disastrous combat that ultimately punishes anyone unlucky enough to spend time with this awful game. Even the biggest fans of Norse mythology and Marvel Comics should stay far away. Thor, God of Thunder is a terrible game that has absolutely no redeeming qualities.
Who wants peace? I want justice.
The wretched visuals would look bad 5 years ago. Everything is coated in a blurry smear that makes the bland textures look even worse. Sadly, the lackluster environments are the high point of this package. Stilted animations give every character the range of a rusty robot, and a terrorizing camera always leaves something important out of the frame. The worst part of the visuals is the stuttering frame rate. Even with the low-rent technology on display, the frame rate still moves in fits and starts that can be downright nauseating before long. The action in God of Thunder is even worse than the presentation. This is a third-person action game with an emphasis on combat, but fighting isn't any fun at all. The core mechanics are implemented in such a crude manner that fights are little more than tiring button-mashing contests. Sluggish controls are the biggest issue in a game overflowing with worthy candidates. There is a noticeable pause between attacks that gives fights a jerky flow. Thor stands stock still for a beat after swinging his hammer or dashing to safety, and it's maddening trying to coax him to move out of the way while an enemy closes in. There are times when Thor just doesn't respond to your button presses at all. He may walk happily into a pit while you're tapping away at the jump button, with no regard at all for your dwindling sanity.
Doesn't matter. They'll suffer for this all the same.
Poor visual feedback adds another layer of frustration to a game already overflowing with issues. There are times when you swing at the enemy and nothing happens. It's unclear if you're too far away, they're momentarily invincible, or they just don't show damage. Blocking can be just as tricky because you may tap the button long before an attack hits you and still inexplicably get hurt. Collision detection is just as problematic. You're likely to get whacked even if you dodge out of the way, which makes playing defensively a poor option at best. Of course, you're never the benefactor of these inconsistencies. If you're slightly off with your aim, the enemy won't feel a thing, so the odds are heavily stacked against you. Boss fights are just as awful as every other part of this game. You need to perform quick-time events to grapple on these giant beasts, but it's incredibly tough to make out what you need to do in the heat of battle. Fights drag on for an excessively long amount of time, and because every fight plays out in mostly the same way, there isn't even any variety to look forward to. The worst part of God of Thunder is that it's incredibly difficult. The myriad problems ensure you die early and often, and the checkpoints are sprinkled so far apart that you have to replay the same areas over and over again. Most of the game plays out in this grueling manner, beating you down relentlessly until you finally squeak by, but things are taken to another level of punishment in the final stage. Here, not only do you have to worry about killing enemies, but there's a clock to fight against as well. It's nearly impossible to take down a horde of ice giants when you have only 10 seconds to spare, which leads to a rage-inducing finish to an already arduous journey.
They fight bravely to the end, but Asgard is lost.
Aside from combat, there are brief platforming sections that are any more fun than the hammer-mashing brawls that surround them. A lack of clear direction means you often wander around looking for where to go next, and the usual problems such as sluggish controls and troublesome camera persist. But that's to be expected in a game ripe with problems. There is not one moment in this entire game that is genuinely fun, which makes the whole experience feel like empty padding. Modern video games just don't get much worse than Thor, God of Thunder.